The story you were taught about where money came from is in every economics textbook on Earth. It's in government explainer videos. It's in nearly every documentary about ancient trade. And it appears to be almost entirely made up, invented not by ancient people, but by one 18th century Scottish philosopher who never once checked whether it actually happened. Somewhere in your wallet, or more likely on a screen in your pocket, sits a number that represents value you can trade for almost anything on Earth. Nobody questions where that idea came from. Money just exists, the way roads exist, the way language exists. But the real story is nothing like the one you know. That philosopher was Adam Smith, and the story goes like this. Before money, humans supposedly bartered directly. A farmer trading grain for a blacksmith's tools. A fisherman trading fish for someone's shoes. The problem, Smith reasoned, is that barter only works if two people each happen to want exactly what the other person has. At exactly the same moment, a coincidence economists call the double coincidence of wants. Money, in this telling, was humanity's clever fix, an object everyone agreed to accept, so trade no longer depended on lucky timing. It's a tidy story. It appears in nearly every economics textbook published since. And there is, as far as anthropologists and historians have ever been able to determine, no solid evidence it ever actually happened, anywhere, at any point in the archaeological or historical record. In 2011, anthropologist David Graeber published a book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years, built on decades of research into the earliest known economic records. And it dismantled Smith's barter story piece by piece. Graeber and the researchers he drew on found something the barter theory completely fails to explain. In every society, anthropologists have actually studied closely, whether ancient Mesopotamian villages or documented tribal economies observed by modern ethnographers. People didn't solve the "I want your tools, but you don't want my grain" problem by trading objects directly. They solved it with memory. You gave your neighbor grain because they needed it. They remembered they owed you something. Later, when you needed help building a wall, they showed up, and the debt was settled, not with an object changing hands in that exact moment, but with an ongoing social ledger of who owed what to whom, tracked entirely in people's heads within a community where everyone already knew everyone else. This flips the textbook sequence completely upside down. Barter didn't come before money. Debt and credit came first, tracked informally through memory and social obligation. Money emerged later, not to replace barter, but to solve an entirely different problem. How do you track debt and settle accounts once a community gets too large, too spread out, or too full of strangers? For everyone to simply remember who owes what? If quietly, having a lifelong assumption flipped upside down is the feeling you come to this channel for, then subscribe. Because what actually created the first money is even stranger than what it replaced. The earliest evidence for that shift comes from southern Mesopotamia, starting around 3000 BCE, and it doesn't look anything like coins jingling in a merchant's pouch. It looks like paperwork. Temples and royal palaces functioned as the region's first financial institutions, not because anyone planned it that way, but because they were the only organizations large enough to manage the scale of grain storage, labor allocation, and redistribution that feeding a growing city required. Administrators working for these institutions needed a way to record who had contributed labor, who had borrowed grain, and how much of it they owed back. And they solved it using the silver shekel, not a coin, but a fixed unit of weight in silver, decreed by rulers to be officially equivalent to a specific quantity of barley. Debts, wages, and prices could now be denominated in a shared unit of account, silver, by weight, even when no actual silver physically changed hands in most everyday transactions. Money, in its earliest verified form, was essentially an accounting technology invented by bureaucrats, not a trading tool invented by merchants. Actual physical coins. The shiny stamped discs most people picture when they hear the word money don't show up in the archaeological record until roughly 2,300 years after that Mesopotamian silver shekel system was already running. The first true coins, stamped with official symbols guaranteeing their weight and purity, appeared in the kingdom of Lydia, in what's now Western Turkey, sometime between 650 and 600 BCE, made from electrum, a naturally occurring gold-silver alloy. And here's the detail that tends to surprise people. Coinage didn't spread outward from one single point of invention. Historians researching the period have found that stamped metal currency emerged independently, within roughly a century of each other, in three separate, unconnected regions: Lydia near the Aegean Sea, the Ganges River Valley in northeastern India, and among city-states in northern China. Why coins? And why then? The most consistent explanation researchers keep landing on isn't peaceful merchants smoothing over trade friction, it's war. Once a stamped coin's weight and purity were guaranteed by a recognizable royal authority, that coin became something a ruler could mint in large quantities and use to pay soldiers directly. Soldiers who came from many different regions, who had no existing social debt relationship with the king, and who needed to be paid in something universally recognized and immediately spendable in unfamiliar territory. Coinage solved a very specific military logistics problem. How do you compensate an army made up of strangers, on the move, far from any community that would normally track their debts and obligations informally? From there, once large quantities of standardized coins were already circulating through a population because soldiers needed to spend their wages on food, lodging, and goods wherever they were stationed, ordinary marketplace trading between strangers, the very barter replaced by money scenario Adam Smith imagined, became possible for the first time. Marketplaces weren't the origin of money. They were a downstream consequence of it, appearing only after coinage minted for war had already flooded a population with a currency strangers could trust. This matters more than it might seem, because it changes what money actually is at its foundation. It wasn't born as a clever solution to an inconvenience between traders who already trusted each other enough to want to swap goods directly. It was born as an institutional tool, first for temple administrators managing debts across a community too large to track by memory, later for kings who needed to pay armies made of strangers with no reason to trust each other at all. Every later form money has taken precious metal coins, paper notes backed by a government promise, numbers in a bank's database, digital currency existing only as entries in a distributed ledger, has kept solving that same original problem in a new material. How do complete strangers with no personal history and no informal social debt between them agree that a specific token represents real value they can rely on? That's also why money has always needed something backing it that has nothing to do with the object itself. Mesopotamian silver shekels worked because temples and rulers had the institutional authority to declare their value and enforce it. Lydian coins worked because a king's stamp guaranteed their metal content. Modern paper currency and digital bank balances work for exactly the same underlying reason those ancient silver weights did. Not because the paper or the numbers have any value on their own, but because an institution, backed by law, trust, and enforcement, stands behind the claim that they do. The materials changed completely: gold, silver, paper, electronic signals. The actual invention never did. It was never really the coin. It was convincing a stranger to trust a token instead of trusting you. If this rewired how you see the number in your own bank account, that's exactly what this channel is for. So subscribe and tell me in the comments, does knowing money was built on trust make you trust it more or less? So the next time you tap a card or glance at a number on a screen representing what you own, you're not looking at the descendant of some ancient farmer trading a chicken for a pair of shoes. You're looking at the descendant of a Mesopotamian temple's debt ledger and a king's need to pay soldiers who had never met each other, wearing 5,000 years of increasingly convincing disguises, still solving the exact same problem it was invented to solve: getting complete strangers to trust each other without actually knowing each other at all.